Today we are going to talk about complete in-box video games. In case you missed it, the price to grade CIB video games has gone way down now. It used to be like $170, now it's all the way down to $40, $50 per game. There's slowly starting to be more interest in collecting and grading CIB video games, and Heritage is even going to have an entire CIB showcase auction later this year. So what we're going to do today is look at what is actually special when we talk about complete in-box grading. What might you actually want to pay up for if you're someone collecting graded CIB games? Right now, in my opinion, there's a lot of people overspending on grades that really aren't that special. A lot of people simply paying too much money for stuff just because it's graded. Thank you to every single patron who helps support the channel, as well as the YouTube members. I can't do this without you guys. Hit the like button and let's talk about CIB video games. So we are going to start with NES, as this is basically the poster child for CIB grading. At this time anyway. There's almost 4,600 submitted games in this data set. That's more games than every other CIB pop report combined. So the NES pop report really has the most data and is probably going to be the most representational of the kind of averages you might expect out on the open market. But with NES, almost 4,600 submitted CIB games, and that is because complete in-box NES went crazy. Like really early too, talking like 2019, 2020, complete in-box NES was super expensive already. Going to the actual WATA pop report, you can see it's still dominated by Mario Bros 3, Super Mario Bros, Legend of Zelda, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, and Super Mario Bros 2. And with Mario Bros 3, there's 200 Left Bros copies that have been submitted so far. And that's because truly it was worth sending in any kind of Left Bros you could get your hands on. You can see that the price there peaked out October 2021 for a 9.4 at $10,200, $7,800 September 2020, April 2019 the 9.4 was already $5,000. Like I said, it was worth sending in any CIB Left Bros you could get your grubby little paws on. And even I was able to take advantage of this early hype here with Left Bros. It got an 8.0 and sold for $1,000 October 2019. Just for comparison's sake, you can see an 8.5 Left Bros in February 2023 is now half the price. Like I said, CIB got crazy on NES really quick. And CIB on NES still can be extremely expensive given how much nuance there is with NES collecting in general. Here's a CIB Hang Tab Mario 8.0 overall that sold literally yesterday, March 21st, 2023. Sold for $1,380. It was simply more worth it for people to send in NES more than any other console. Actually, looking at the numbers though, you can see anything 9.0 and above is only 15% of the total pop that's been submitted. 85% is below 9.0. So 9.0 and above, you start getting into some pretty special territory with NES. And even from 9.0 to 9.2, the total cuts in half there. Now, of course, when we talk about CIB games, there's many different ways to create an 8.0, an 8.5, or a 9.0. So if you see something that has a really special box, the box takes up 50% of the overall grade. So if you have something that's like an 8.5 overall, but it has a 9.4 box, then you're still dealing with something that's pretty special, even though the overall grade isn't necessarily in the upper echelon. And the most common distribution here for NES games are in the 7, 7.5, and 8.0 levels. 7.5 being the most commonly submitted grade at this time. And given just how expensive it was to submit CIB NES games, I assume people didn't want to end up with 7, 7.5, or 8.0s. And I think one of the biggest reasons for seeing so much sub 9 distribution is people just underestimating what it takes to get a WATA 9.0 or above on a CIB game. When we talk about complete in-box grading, there are considerations that do not exist with sealed grading. All of a sudden you have hinge damage from opening the game over and over. The inside tabs themselves can be creased or damaged. The box itself can have rubbing, chafing, scratching damage from just being handled over the years. And then of course your normal creasing, crushing, whatever. But with these added dimensions for where to appear on the boxes, the average grade here is absolutely much lower than what we see with factory sealed NES. And that leads me back to saying that people are probably just overestimating what a nice CIB actually is. A casual person's mint is probably an 8 or an 8.5 on the WATA scale. Still a very nice item, but you're not breaking into that 9.0 and above where it actually gets pretty special. So then looking at the data set, and I mentioned this in the Discord not too long ago, it's very likely that right now people are paying way too much for 7.0 and 7.5 graded CIBs. They just aren't that special, and the supply of them out there is going to be huge. Just picking on CIB Mario Bros 3 again, a CGC7 just sold for $432 on Heritage. There's just no world where prices like that can continue to sustain themselves. I just want to mention this 8.5 right beside it because this is a perfect example of how not every complete in-box game is going to be built equally. This is a 7.5 box with a 9.6 cart and a 9.6 manual. It's an 8.5 overall, but you could argue that since the box grade itself is so low, maybe it shouldn't be valued as high. But you can also argue that since the cartridge and the manual are both 9.6, which are basically immaculate, that this should sell at a massive premium. It sold for $192, which honestly just just seems pretty fair overall. But that is a perfect example of how you have to make sure to look at your subgrades when we're talking about CIB grading. The way you construct your overall grade when we talk about CIBs matters a lot. So if you're going to be going after NES CIB graded games and you're looking to pay a premium for them, looking to create them for yourself, you should probably not be looking to pay a premium for anything that's a 7 or a 7.5. Odds are you'll be able to go to eBay yourself and buy a copy in that condition for less money. Obviously, it still matters what game you're buying. If we're talking about early black box NES, yes, a 7.5 is fantastic. If we're talking about something that's kind of dime a dozen, something that doesn't have as much demand attached to it, you probably shouldn't pay a big premium for a 7.5 Disney's Adventures in the Magic Castle. If we go over to Super Nintendo, we only have 742 that have been submitted, and we see much more distribution at the 9.0 and above level here. The population report is dominated by Chrono Trigger and Link to the Past, Final Fantasy 3, Super Metroid, Super Mario Kart, Donkey Kong Country, many of the most popular games on the console. And my best guess is that with Super Nintendo not quite having that early print nuance that you see with NES, there's just less overall incentive to submit a lot of Super Nintendo games unless you really have the best of the best. So we start seeing a more tighter knit submission here. But even so, even when people are probably sending in what they consider to be some of the nicest copies of the games that they own, we still see the 7.5, 8.0, and 8.5 being the most common distributions. And again, I have to assume if people know their game's going to get a 7.5 or an 8.0, they might not be willing to submit it. I think this is likely more evidence of people appraising their items too high before they get graded. But still, it does show that hitting these high grades is fully possible. Beautiful copies of these games are out there. But given how few have been submitted so far, it's going to be more interesting to see how the Super Nintendo percentages here change as we get to the end of 2023. N64 has even less than Super Nintendo at only 561 copies. And if we talk about 9.0 and above distribution on N64, the 9.2, 9.4, and 9.6 are extremely scant. And you can see there's only 13 so far that have even gotten a 9.4. Of course, submitting N64, not as popular right now. There's less people doing it, less people motivated to do it, as not many CIB games sell for thousands of dollars on N64. But as it stands right now, if you have beautiful CIB N64 games, there's very likely some opportunity for you to send them out to get graded and put them onto the market now rather than later. Again, we're gonna have to see how this pop report develops as the year goes on. We should get a new WATA pop report update soon here. It's been almost 3 or 4 months. With Game Boy games, it's basically just the Pokemon pop report here. And even with Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, if you can get yourself a 9.2 or above, you have a special condition game there. Across all 3 games, there are no 9.6s, there are no 9.8s, and there are only 7 9.4 CIB copies right now. If you have a beautiful Pokemon game, again, it would be worth your time right now to get it graded and maybe sell it. You'll likely get a pretty big premium. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about hard cases here with the Genesis pop report. It's only 324 games, but you can immediately see that there is a 37% distribution at the 9.0 and above level. And that is, of course, because the Genesis box, which makes up 50% of the grade, is almost always going to be a 9.0 or above. Genesis cases are a lot harder to damage than cardboard boxes, and we're gonna see this trend continue when we finally get PS2, GameCube, PS1 pop reports. They're all going to lean way higher with the averages due to being hard cases. There obviously still is nuance with this. If you are collecting DVD-style jewel case games, you want to make sure to get mint cover arts that doesn't have wear across the top or bottom edges that can sometimes be exposed, mint manuals without crinkling and creasing, discs that do not have scratches on them. So even on this hard case stuff where we're going to see the averages swing higher than usual, the 9.2 to 9.8 level is still very likely going to be special. I personally have a ton of CIB games I'm going to be sending off eventually here, and if you find yourself out hunting for games, always make sure you're considering the actual condition of the game, not just the price. You can get amazing finds if you learn how to assess condition properly based on these grading metrics. Let me know if you're going to be buying graded CIBs or sending your own off. Hit the like button before you go, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.